What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews, exclusively here as always on the Casa D18 Studios channel. I, of course, am your host, the Renegade JJ Williams, and today we're going to finish up the final Monster Mash movie officially before we get into the Abbott and Costello films. and that is 1945's House of Dracula, starring Lon Chaney Jr. back as the Wolfman, John Carradine once again in the role of Count Dracula, Glenn Strange once again in the role of Frankenstein's Monster, along with Martha O'Driscoll, Lionel Atwill, Onslow Stevens, and Jane Addams. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me here once again for another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews. Like I said during the introduction, today's film is the final official chapter of the Dracula saga. It's the final official monster mashup film before we get into the Abbott and Costellos, because this is the last one to feature the timelines of all the three monsters converging into one. The Frankenstein Monster, the Wolfman, and Count Dracula. Now, as our movie opens, Count Dracula arrives at the castle home of Dr. Franz Edelman, and the Count explains to Dr. Edelman that he has come to Visaria in order to find a cure for his vampirism. Dr. Edelman agrees to help, believing that a series of blood transfusions could help cure the vampirism. The Count agrees to this, and the doctor uses his very own blood for the transfusions. Afterwards, the Count has his coffin placed in the castle basement. That evening, Lawrence Talbot arrives at the castle, demanding to see Dr. Edelman about a cure for his lycanthropy, his werewolfism. Talbot is asked to wait, but knowing that the full moon is rising, he has himself incarcerated by the local police. Inspector Holtz asks Dr. Edelman to come and see Talbot, and as the full moon rises, they both witness his transformation into the Wolfman. The next morning, Dr. Edelman and his assistant, Melizia, have Talbot transferred to the castle. Dr. Edelman tells Talbot that he believes that the moonlight does not trigger the transformations, but he believes that it's pressure on the brain, turning this into a more scientific thing now, as opposed to such a superstitious thing. Dr. Edelman believes that he can relieve the pressure, but he asks Talbot to wait while he gathers more spores from a plant that he feels can cure him. Despondent at the thought of becoming the Wolfman once again, Talbot attempts suicide by jumping into the ocean off of a cliff, only to end up in a cave below the castle. Dr. Edelman finds Talbot in the cave, where they come across the catatonic Frankenstein Monster, who is still clutching the skeleton of Dr. Niemann from the previous film, House of Frankenstein. The humidity in the cave is perfect for propagating Clavia formisa, and a natural tunnel in the cave connects to a basement in the castle. Dr. Edelman takes the monster back to his lab, but considers reviving him to be far too dangerous. Meanwhile, the Count tries to seduce Melizia and make her a vampire, but Melizia wards him off with a cross. The doctor interrupts in order to explain that he has found some strange antibodies in the Count's blood, which will require another blood transfusion. Edelman's assistant, Nina, shadows Melizia and discovers that the Count casts no reflection in the mirror. Nina then warns Dr. Edelman of the vampire's danger to Melizia, and the doctor prepares a transfusion that will destroy the vampire. During the procedure, however, the Count uses his hypnotic powers in order to put Dr. Edelman and Nina to sleep. He then reverses the flow of the transfusion, sending his own blood into the doctor's veins. When they awaken, the Count is seen carrying Milizia away. They revive Talbot and force the Count away with a cross, and Count Dracula returns to his coffin just as the sun is rising. Dr. Edelman follows Dracula and drags the open coffin into the sunlight, destroying him. Dr. Edelman begins to react to Dracula's blood and discovers that he no longer casts a reflection in the mirror. Dr. Edelman then falls unconscious and begins to see strange visions of a monstrous version of himself performing unspeakable acts. Edelman awakens and tries to perform the operation on Talbot, but the doctor begins to transform into a more monstrous personality and ends up murdering his gardener. When the townspeople discover the body, they chase Edelman, believing that he is Talbot. They then follow him to the castle where Holtz and Steinmull interrogate Talbot and Edelman. Steinmull is convinced that the doctor is the murderer and assembles a mob to execute him. The operation cures Talbot, but Edelman once again turns into his monstrous self. Dr. Edelman then revives the Frankenstein monster, with the others witnessing Edelman's transformation. Dr. Edelman then breaks Nina's neck and tosses her body into the cave. Holtz and Steinmull lead the townspeople to the castle, where police attack the monster but are subdued by the creature. The doctor kills Holtz by accidental electrocution, and Talbot shoots Edelman dead. As our movie comes to its conclusion, Talbot helps trap the monster under some fallen shelving as a fire breaks out and the townspeople flee the burning castle, while the burning roof collapses onto the Frankenstein monster. This was a fun little way to end the official Monster Mash, but I do have some issues about this film. First of all, vampires, Dracula, are supposed to be destroyed by either exposure to sunlight, stake to the heart. Right? Right. In House of Frankenstein, Dracula's coffin was drug out into the open, and Dracula was killed via the sunlight. So how was he alive for this one? That's the biggest plot hole problem that I have with this. And then you have the Frankenstein monster getting trapped under the burning roof to end this one. Lawrence Talbot is finally cured all of a sudden after all these years of turmoil. It's a fun movie, but the ending is a little lackluster. To think that after all these films, Larry is just magically cured by his operation. Now, of course, when we get to tomorrow's film, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which we'll get into a little bit later, we'll talk more about that. Everybody is back again. Clearly, it's a standalone film. I've never tried to claim that ties into this storyline. But Dracula being in this film after being drugged into the sunlight and killed at the end of House of Frankenstein, and then to be killed the same way. Not even to get the stake through the heart again, but to be killed the same way. I just feel made that part of it really lackluster for me. I'm curious to know what you guys think, though. those of you that have seen House of Dracula. As far as the monster mashup films, being Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, this one I definitely feel is the absolute weakest. Like, they really pushed it here. And again, while a lot of the elements within the story were fine, Dr. Edelman and Nina and Milizia and Talbot coming to try to get his cure, which is what he's been looking for ever since the first Wolfman film. Finding the monster with Dr. Neiman still in his clutches. Okay, that makes sense because of the way they sank in the quicksand at the end of the last film. Every other part of it makes sense, and I can get behind it. The Dracula part really kills it for me. And had Dracula not been in this film, obviously it would have been Frankenstein meets the Wolfman Part 2. But I think if Dracula hadn't been in this one, and maybe instead if we had like The Mummy or A Return of the Bride of Frankenstein, I think it would have been a little bit better. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. For me, though, when it comes to this one, I only give it 1.5 stars. I think the Dracula portion of this really weighed it down and hurt it. Otherwise, it could have easily been a good 2.5 to 3 star film. But resurrecting Dracula after a definitive kill off of him by exposing him to sunlight at the end of the last film, and then him dying the exact same way again in this one, I just feel that hurt it for me personally. Again, I'd like to know what you guys think. If you're watching the premiere, let me know with your thoughts and comments over here. If you're watching on demand later in the day, let me know with your thoughts and comments down here. Whatever you guys do, though, when you get out there on social media, let's try to get those hashtags trending. Hashtag Casa D18 Studios, hashtag Renegades Reviews, hashtag Renegade Returns, and of course, the ever popular hashtag Shenanigans. We interrupt this episode of Renegades Reviews for an important announcement about
merchandising.
Merchandising? What's that?
Merchandising. Come, I'll show you. Merchandising, where the real money's made.
Make sure you go over to teespring.com/stores/Jeff Meacham Network for all the t-shirts you see here from the West Coast professor, Jeff Meacham himself. You can get shirts for the Jeff Meacham Network, Talk Wrestling, as well as the red and gold Meachamania shirts. And while you're there, don't forget to get your shirts of the Casa D18 Studios Brotherhood, the Dads on Wrestling shirt, the Renegade J.J. Williams, Statboy Sports Bar, and the hashtag Statboy Approved shirt. Make sure you go over to teespring.com/stores/Jeff Meacham Network and score your shirts today. Make sure you guys tune in tomorrow, right back here on the Casa D18 Studios channel, for another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews, which will be replayed 1 hour later on the Jeff Meacham Network. And me and Jeff Meacham will be discussing 1948's Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, starring comedy duo Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, Lon Chaney Jr. back in the role of the Wolfman, Bela Lugosi returning to the role of Count Dracula for the first time since 1931, Glenn Strange back in the role of the Frankenstein Monster, along with Lenore Aubert, Jane Randolph, Frank Ferguson, and a brief cameo at the end by Vincent Price as the Invisible Man. You're not going to want to miss out on that one tomorrow, right back here on the Casa D18 Studios channel, right back here on an all-new Renegades Reviews, when I discuss my gateway drug to the Universal Monsters, Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein. It's going to be a good one for sure. To all my loyal fans and viewers out there tuning in for the premiere that have been leaving your thoughts and comments over here, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Likewise, all my loyal fans and viewers out there tuning in a little bit later in the day, watching on demand, leaving your thoughts and comments down here. Thank you very much. I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate all my loyal fans and viewers out there. Tune in on a regular basis. Show me that love. Show me that support. Going back to the archives, watching old episodes of Renegade Wrestling, Dad's on Wrestling, After the Bell with Jeff Meacham, Stat Boy Rants, doing what you can to help me boost up my viewership hours so I can eventually get monetized and make some money on this endeavor. Thank you very much to each and every one of you that tuned in and joined me today, and I will see you guys next time.